So again, thank you so much for joining. Here is a small introduction to the work. So my name is Sérgio Henriques, and I work with the IUCN SSC. And one of the things people most recognize about the IUCN is, of course, the red list. This is the red list of the giant panda, probably the most charismatic species on Earth. If you notice on the corner of that red list logo, there is the IUCN logo. So the IUCN is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. It is a membership union of government and civil society. It's quite unique in that sense. It was founded in 1948, so it has over 75 years of impact, and it has a global credibility as an authority for conservation. It is also an observer and a consultative status in the United Nations, which is quite unique. From the IUCN, several bodies have emerged. One of them is CITES, which is an agreement, an international trade of species, and that's the logo. WWF is one of the NGOs who has also, I want to just address to see if someone has a question. You can just write it in the chat and I'll try to keep up on that. Hope the sound is okay. People in the room, of course, can hear me. I don't know how those elsewhere can, but my audio is on, so I hope it's okay. So like I said, WWF also emerged from IUCN, and lastly, the Convention on Biological Diversity. There are more, but these are some of the three most people might be most familiar with. The IUCN is organized into 7 commissions, and here are 6 of those. The Commission on Environmental Economics, Climate Change, Climate Crisis Commission, and so on. I do not work with any of these 6 commissions. I work with the Species Species Survival Commission, which is the SSC of the IUCN. That's the vision of the IUCN SSC. It currently has 186 countries in its representation. It has over 157, now it's close to 160,000 species assessed in the red list, and it has 18 centers for species survival. I fit within one of these 18s, and I'll tell you more in a minute. So the IUCN SSC is the largest volunteer conservation science network. It's also one of the oldest. It has 10,072 members. When it beat that record, it got a World Guinness record, and that's a picture of us in the leaders meeting in Abu Dhabi, and I am on the left corner of that picture over there. Doesn't matter. The IUCN SSC is over 10,000 people, but they're all volunteer. That's an important keyword here, but they're not equally distributed around the world. If you look at this map, the IUCN has this division per region. So Africa is one region, East Europe, North and Central Asia another, and so on. A lot of our members are in Europe. A lot of them are in North America. And if you look at that small little sphere to the right over North Korea, China over there, that's what IUCN considers South and East Asia, West Asia, and West Asia is 1%. It is the smallest representation, it's the one before last in the chart and has the smallest representation. So we have the fewest members in the area where we are right now, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to hold the workshop here in Okinawa. Japan, South Korea is underrepresented in the network. It's the least represented in the network, I should say. The SSC is divided into specialist groups, and they vary a lot in remit. Some are thematical, we call it, like, for example, the invasive species specialist group. Others are geographic, like the Atlantic Island Invertebrate specialist group, focusing on the Atlantic Islands overall. And some are taxonomical. Those are the most classical or well-known, like the Sharks and Rays specialist group or the Freshwater Crustacean specialist group. That's the group that is closer to the remit we're discussing today, but as you know, hermit crabs are not really freshwater crustacean, nor are they really marine. We will talk about marine when I mention Coralie. She's our marine coordinator, and we are now in the process of creating a new specialist group for marine decapods. Hermit crabs, however, even though some are marine, terrestrial ones still do fit this gap because they're neither truly terrestrial or fully terrestrial, neither are they fully marine. So that's another gap. Not only is Japan a gap, but terrestrial hermit crabs is a second gap. So there's a big overlap here. So the Species Survival Commission works with the species conservation cycle, which you see now. It has mainly three components. That's assess in red, and that's usually the red list. Even though there's other products, there is the green status, which is the opposite of the red list. The red list measures risk of extinction. The green status measures proximity to success or conservation recovery. There's planning, which is a conservation action plan. What do we need to do? How much does it cost? Who needs to be involved? Sort of document. And of course, the ACT, which is the most intuitive conservation to explain, which is conservation action, reforestation, removing pollutants, things like that. And there's two supporting points that I want to mention in passing, which is network and communicate. This workshop is part, of course, of networking, and I hope as we discuss these issues, it might be used to communicate those threats to those outside of this meeting. So it also does those two, but the conservation cycle is mostly those three components. Working, of course, is a cycle, so it perpetually supports itself. So like I said, they're all volunteers, so they struggle to do their work. That is, maybe we dropped for a second. Okay, so like I was saying, the Centers for Species Survival, at the moment they're 18, and there's many centers, like you can see them on the map. There are, however, no centers in this part of the world. The closest center is Mandai Nature, and that's in Singapore, and there's no center in Japan or in any of the countries near Japan where we are now. Yes, hi. Hi, thank you. Switch off. So I will, thank you. I will not do that. I will restart the presentation. Thank you. Yeah. I think the meeting ended, so cancel. Yes, I think there was a little gap of the internet, and that was enough to. All right, so I'll share the screen again. Sorry, it's now appears the Zoom window and all sorts of funny business. And now should be, thank you, Professor. Okay, so like I was saying, the IUCN is a group of volunteers, over 10,000 of them, and sometimes these people are professors, researchers, park rangers, so they sometimes lack the capacity to do all the things they want to achieve. And one of the ways for them to find support is via the Centers for Species Survival. There are many centers around the world. The nearest one to where we are now is Mandai Nature in Singapore. The centers usually have one single focus. So for example, a good example is the Morton Arboretum in Chicago, who only focuses on trees. So they support the tree specialist group. And for example, in my home country of Portugal, there is the CSS Marine in the Oceanário of Lisbon, and they focus on marine species. So they don't cover the entire remit of the network. There is, however, a global center for species survival, and that is where I work. And instead of having, let's say, one staff dedicated to marine or two staff dedicated to trees, it has 8 staff. It is by far the largest center, and it is global in its remit. So it doesn't focus on a single group of organisms, neither does it focus in a single country. So it has a coordinator for mammals, one for freshwater, one for plants and fungi, even though that position will now be divided into one for plant and one for fungi, one for reptiles and amphibians, Coralie Palmer, which I mentioned in passing, who is our marine coordinator, with whom I work closely for the marine crustaceans and decapods. And of course, I'm the coordinator for invertebrates, Sam for birds, and Kelly Greasy for our PR. And so that's the group of the Global Center. And my job at the Global Center, one of my jobs, is of course to support the existing groups, but also detect gaps in groups that do not yet exist, but in my opinion really should or need support. And because we talked about the red list, and that is probably one of the topics most people are interested in, I should say the Global Center usually focus on supporting planning and action, and that's usually our drive. Having said that, we understand that for inverts, in my remit, that's rarely we have no place to start because the red listing hasn't yet been done. So red listing is sometimes a priority for the groups under my remit. So just for students or those who want to pursue this further, if you'd like to have red list assessor training, so know how to red list a species, people have asked me this, you may go online, and that's the website, conservationtraining.org. And as you go there, you can do the training, is free, and you get a certificate in the end, you have tests. It can be done at anyone's time, at your pace, and that's one way. We could, of course, have in-person workshops, something we can discuss as well, but now you know you have this tool available online. I don't want to have like a cop-out and just tell you, go here and look. I will, of course, do a short summary that's the main part of my introduction, that we should keep in mind as we hear Dr. Reimer present and of course, Dr. Naruse and the others, so you can keep in mind what information to gather that would support red listing of these species. So on the left of my slide is a summary of the categories. So when we look at all species of animals, plants, and fungi, all species are red listable, even though, except if they're microscopic, something we're discussing, but most species are not evaluated. We know they exist, they have a name, but nobody has evaluated them. They follow into that category at the bottom. If we have attempt to evaluate it, but the category or the outcome of that analysis is that they are as likely to be extinct or to be least concerned, so it's a very broad scope of possibilities, they may be data deficient. We just do not know enough. This is quite rare, or can be quite rare, even though it's more common in invertebrates. And then we go to the categories that most people know. At the top, you have extinct. That's a fairly intuitive one to explain. And at the lowest, in a way, with the least extinction risk, is least concern, and the others fall in the middle. They have a red dash line around the threatened categories. Those are the ones people know maybe more intuitively because they're more often used in communication. Near threatened is basically a least concerned species that is close to being threatened, and so it's near threatened. Those are the categories. We use criteria, ways to assess that, and those are the ones on the right. So I'll give you a few examples. The criteria A measures population reduction. And the example I have here is if we have a projected population decline of 80%, so in the last 10 years, we think the species declined by 80% in its population, that fulfills the criteria for critically endangered. If that drop was of 50%, then it fulfills it for endangered. If it's 30, it fulfills it for vulnerable. And that's how we assess species in different categories. They have very specific thresholds to meet scientifically, and that's criteria A in a very, very summarized nutshell. So B is the most used criteria in the red list, and that's restricted geographic range. If a species has 100 kilometers square of area of occupancy or extent of occurrence, we say, in its range, 100 kilometers or less, it usually falls within the critically endangered category. If it fulfills also other factors, it's not the only thing, but it's a good way to visualize it. If it can fit, or if it exists in a range of 5,000 square kilometers or less, it fulfills endangered. If it's 20,000 kilometers, it fulfills vulnerable. And that's the overall idea that I wanted to make, is that there are very specific numbers that need to be analyzed to fulfill different categories. The criteria C is small population size and decline. I gave an example there as well. And then there's very small and restricted population. That's criteria D. And the last one is the extinction probability analysis. And so usually people have to look at all of those, see which one it fits, and we use a precautionary approach, which is whichever criteria gives the highest ranked or the highest threat category, out of precaution, that's the one the species gets assigned with. So when one now, just out of 1 minute or so that I spent explaining it, when one looks at the giant panda, you now know that it being vulnerable means it's on the lowest scale of a threatened species, but it's threatened nonetheless. And you can see that it's somewhere in the middle, but in fact is on a threatened category. The middle here means relatively little. An interesting thing is that when we look at hermit crabs in the red list, there is one species of hermit crab, and that is the giant coconut crab, which is vulnerable. It was only assessed in 2020, so fairly recently, and no other species has been assessed. And it too, like the panda, not a coincidence, is also vulnerable. Very recently, I was here in Okinawa talking about invasive ants, and that's the poster for that roundtable. To the left, you see pictures from the article that supported the red listing of the giant coconut crab I mentioned, and those are pictures from a documentary where you see yellow crazy ants attacking a giant coconut crab. Is one of the threats to these species is, of course, invasive ants. And those are pictures from documentary. You can see it attacking its eyes and attacking the joints where the coconut crab is most sensitive. So anyway, so that's the only species we have at the moment, but we recognize it's a gap, and I have a short video from from this researcher we work with, which is Linda Harris. And Linda Harris has been proposing a sandy beach specialist group for the IUCN, and part of my role is to support her doing that. And both her and myself have recognized hermit crabs as a gap, Japan as a further gap, and interestingly, Japan considers hermit crabs as a national treasure. So all conditions met for me to think this was a great group to advocate for. So she won the Pew Awards very recently. This is a press release, from March 2026 for her work in sandy beach ecosystems. And she couldn't join us today, but she kindly made a video, which I will play now.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda Harris from Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. I would like to invite you to join our Google group called the Society for the Study of Sandy Beaches. It is an online sharing platform where we can share information, share news about upcoming events, and so on. So if you would like to participate in that group, you can either search for us on Google Groups, or you can give your email address to Sergio, and he can then pass them on to us to add to the Google group. Particularly our pool of expertise and the scientists that we have in that group working on sandy beaches don't really include experts on hermit crabs, because it's not really part of the systems of in many of the countries where we work. That's not, hermit crabs are not present on our beaches. So if you would like to join the Google group, we would very much love to have you join us. And in particular, on that platform, we'll be sharing news about the next International Sandy Beach Symposium, which will be held in South Africa in June 2027. And if you would like to attend that conference, you can. That's where most of the news will be posted. And if you're interested obviously you are interested in working on sandy beaches because you're working on hermit crabs. But for those who have publications that are about ready to submit, there is currently a special virtual issue of estuarine, coastal and shelf science on sandy beaches that is open for submissions until the end of April. So if you would like to contribute to that and submit your manuscripts, there's not a lot of time left, but that opportunity is also available. Right, hope to see many of you in South Africa in June 2027. Cheers, bye.
Cool. So I'm going to do something really amazing today. I'm going to talk about marine biodiversity, and I'm not going to use the word crabs. I'm sorry. I am going to just give a really general talk about eDNA. Should I turn my... No. Okay. I'm going to talk about eDNA, and I'm going to talk a little bit about marine biodiversity in Okinawa, just a really simple overview. For those of you that are watching, I think most everyone in the room knows, but we run a lab called Molecular Invertebrate Systematics and Ecology. We call ourselves MISE. We have about 40 members from 15 different countries, including Japan, but also all around the world. And really, we look at marine biodiversity, particularly understudied marine organisms, and recently the effects of coastal development on marine biodiversity. So it's kind of, you could put conservation sort of in between there. Sorry, hang on. My memory is also not loading the figures well. And so, we're basically interested in basic taxonomy and diversity, but then at the same time, we're also looking at conservation. And so one thing I think that everyone sort of maybe in the room knows, but maybe some of you online don't know, is about Okinawa and marine biodiversity in Okinawa. And so just like how Sergio was talking about the IUCN being biased in terms of the Species Survival Commission, in terms of membership, if you look at research across Okinawa and the Ryukyu Islands, these are the islands between mainland Japan and China and Taiwan. You can see we've divided these into 5 or 6 different geographic groups. The size of the circle indicates the amount of research that has been done in each of these island groups. So you can see a lot of research has been done, for example, around Okinawa, whereas very little research has been done, say, on Miyako or on the Tokara Islands. And inside this circle, you have the different colors. These are demonstrating the different groups of animals that people have been studying. If I remember correctly, the blue is corals and cnidaria, the orange is crustacea, and I think the green is fish. 70, 80, 90% of the research that's being done on biodiversity in this region are on those 3 phylum only. So all of the other groups of animals are really lacking in terms of research. So not only do we have bias geographically, we also have bias in terms of what people are studying. The thing that I find amazing, I don't necessarily think it's crustacea, but particularly for fish and for a lot of the corals, the hard corals, there's a lot of taxonomic issues, but they're relatively well known. And yet we continue to study these groups more than other groups that are not well known. So there's clear need right here. The other thing, when you sort of look into conservation, and the projector is a little bit light, maybe it's a little bit easier to see on here. This is comparing research in Okinawa by numbers of papers across year with other marine regions. So we're comparing research in Okinawa, which is in blue, with the Great Barrier Reef in gray, the Red Sea in reddish orange, and the Caribbean in yellow. And obviously the research numbers are lower, but you can see that Okinawa kind of tracks similarly, similar amounts for a lot of topics. But there's some topics that are not being researched in southern Japan. For example, this one right here. This is marine protected areas, conservation. There's one single paper from the entire region across since 1995. And so basically by doing this, you can sort of guess or figure out what research needs to be done in terms of marine biodiversity and conservation in Okinawa. At the same time, and this actually fits really well with what Sergio is talking about, is you have this background of extinction. This is a famous paper from about 10 years ago now, looking at extinction rates across time. And you have mammals and birds and vertebrates and other vertebrates. I'm not exactly sure what those are. And the dotted line at the bottom is what you would expect as a background rate. And so you can see around the Industrial Revolution, you've got an inflection point. Species are facing increased risks of extinction. At the same time, you take a look at all of these, except for the fish right here, most of these groups of animals are terrestrial. So this is also sort of, while showing us that extinction rates are increasing, that marine animals and extinction rates are really lagging in terms of research. Charismatic megafauna, a lot of these have not been assessed. On top of that, when you think about Okinawa, this is another paper that I came across a few years ago. It's actually from 2002. And I tell everyone it's one of my favorite papers because the figure looks like Minecraft, but it's actually really cool. What they've done here is they have assessed endemicity, so how narrow a range of a species is found in. They've included global threats, such as coastal development, and they've looked at total biodiversity, and they assessed which regions of the world we should be doing better at conserving biodiversity, marine biodiversity. The number one answer was Taiwan and southern Japan. And this is something to me that when I found this was totally amazing, because no one or very few people in Japan seem to talk about this, and the fact that we're living in this area that's incredibly diverse with incredibly unique species, and it's under large amounts of threat. This threat is climate change for one, but it's also anthropogenic issues for two. And so there's a double sort of group of pressure that's facing this. Someone at the door. Okay, so if we look at Okinawa, besides climate change, the other sort of major issue facing Okinawa and the region of southern Japan, and probably Taiwan too, is anthropogenic stressors. And these stressors include a lot of different things. For example, we know that coral coverage is decreasing around Okinawa. We know there's a lot of problems with bleaching. This is climate change. Also with typhoon patterns being disrupted by climate change. More typhoons, stronger typhoons, less typhoons, and then more warmer water and bleaching. So there's a lot of different issues here. There's also been recorded outbreaks of crown of thorns starfish in the region. We have serious problems with construction and red soil runoff. And of course, there are large ongoing projects with land reclamation. Since Okinawa was reverted to Japan in 1972, there has always been some large coastal development program going on. And also there are, it's relatively understudied, but there are issues with pollution, including PFASs. So there are a lot of issues facing the coastal ecosystems and the marine biodiversity of Okinawa. If we focus in on Okinawa main island, these patterns are something that I think is really unique to this area, but also make this a really interesting natural laboratory. If you take a look at Okinawa main island, when Okinawa reverted to Japanese control in 1972, the central government and the Okinawa prefectural government, they made a plan that they were going to make Okinawa into the next Hawaii. And what they did was they divided the area, Okinawa main island, into 4 areas. So you have the urban area down in the south. You have tourism on the west coast, industrial area on the east coast, and up north you have the Yambaru, or the subtropical forest. And if you look at this now, this pattern largely holds now, this pattern of development. You have Naha and large city agglomeration in the south. West coast, you have a lot of resorts and sort of shopping malls, etc. East coast is a little bit more local with most of the power plants and garbage centers. And the north is still, relatively speaking, pristine. So to me, this island is 100, 110 kilometers long, but finding all of these different pressures in one small area that you can easily drive to or in an hour or two is really unique. Plus the fact that this area is highly threatened and highly endemic and highly diverse. So what you have here is a really cool natural laboratory that you can use to sort of test ideas about marine biodiversity or about how these stressors affect things. And so one of the things we did now 6 or 7 years ago, this was with Joey Di Battista. He's actually now at Griffith University in Australia, but he was at the Australian Museum and Curtin University in Australia when he did this. We went to some different sites around Okinawa, and you can see the sites are marked with colored circles. The circles represent the amounts of anthropogenic pressure. We calculated whether areas had higher, medium, or low amounts of pressure. And we went to these and we didn't even collect crabs or zoantharians or anything. We collected water. And we basically collected water, did a lot of filtering, and then we looked at the total biodiversity at these areas. The next slide sort of shows the methods. This is just for, if you want the PowerPoint, I can give it to you after. We looked at 18S, which is one single DNA marker region that sort of works well for all of metazoans. We filtered the water. The important thing are the results. And so this paper from 2021, the thing that we found rather interesting was, one, that you could divide the pressure grouped areas into 3 different groups very, very clearly. So the medium has the medium area, which is, where is it? Where's my marker right here? The upside down triangles has a very different signature than the pristine areas or the high impact areas. So in other words, we have total metazone community data that's reflecting what we think are amounts of anthropogenic pressure. So that's one thing. The second thing is, if you look at all of the different taxa on this chart and what is pulling the data in different directions, these are groups such as diatoms, polychaetes, dinoflagellates, ostracods, platyhelminthes, which very few people study and which are very not well known. So in other words, while we're busy concerned with fish and crustaceans and corals, a lot of these other groups of animals seem to be very good bioindicators of human pressure. And at the same time, we don't have a very complete database of these. So this was an initial study to just sort of see how eDNA works around Okinawa and what we could see. But with that in mind, then we conducted some more research in the past couple of years. And that's what I want to talk about today for the last part. So what we did in this study is, again, we chose different sites around Okinawa, as you can see on the map. Some of them up in the north are relatively pristine. Other areas on the west coast and the south and central area are more impacted. And then also some island groups. So here are the Karama Islands. These are very pristine sites. And what we did is we took eDNA, but we also did transects, like marine underwater visual surveys, to just sort of compare what was going on. We did 2 depths, shallow and deep. We did replicates, we collected lots of water, and then we did a lot of very statistical analyses. For those of you that aren't familiar with eDNA, I think almost everyone is these days, but here's a nice graphic. Basically, it's really hard to see on the screen, but there's a bunch of eDNA right there. It's really hard to see, right? Small, right? And you have divers, they go swimming, we collect water, then we take this water, we filter it, and then we extract the eDNA. This time we used CO1 instead of 18S, which is another universal marker looking at all metazoans. It doesn't amplify everything, but it amplifies a lot of things, would be the best way to explain it. And then we do some editing, run some analyses, and make some decisions. So I'm going to show you the results. The first thing is old school results, really simple stuff. So this is benthic cover. So this is from our transects, from our photographs and just looking underwater. And what you can see on the left is there's a lot of algae and there's a lot of hard coral in orange. And then at the more impacted sites, the hard coral was replaced by the pink soft coral. So you had some nice patterns here. And this is reflected when we did some multidimensional analyses. Basically, the low, the medium, and the high sort of fall out into statistically significant different groups, the low and the high being particularly different. So this is great. This is wonderful, right? We can go in the water and we can look and say, these sites appear to be different. Wonderful. If you look at the coral, surprisingly, even though you have a lot of different, so this is looking only at the coral in the transects, the results are not so good. What you have is the high impact sites. It seems the coral do lots of different things, whereas in the more pristine sites, it's a much more narrow gap. But the coral community alone is not really giving us a clear picture of anthropogenic diversity, which is a little bit sad for coral researchers because we're often worried about how corals are being impacted by anthropogenic change. But these results are kind of suggesting, well, coral might not be the best group to use. So then we looked at the eDNA. The first thing, this is an overall assessment of all the different sites. You've got a map showing your composition, which change. It's pretty hard to see here. We'll show more later in detail. We got a lot of reads, thousands, tens of thousands of reads from each of the different sites across, I think in total, 20 or 30 phylum. The main ones were fish, crustaceans, 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 echinoderms, and a few others. But there was a lot of different, the results worked well. This is basically a slide saying, okay, we got eDNA and it worked. When you look at the composition of different groups, and again, unless you have amazing eyesight, this is going to be hard to see, but the pink are basically plankton and algae. And the results here basically are showing that a lot of the major reads, a lot of the major components we're getting back from the eDNA are not groups that we work on. It's not fish, it's not arthropods, it's not corals. It's a lot of these minor groups. When you cluster things together by anthropogenic impact in site, so the colors are showing the different anthropogenic impact, what we see there is even though we have different depths at each site, that's not as important as the sampling location. Each sampling location has its own unique eDNA signature. Is sort of the take-home message here. But when you put all of this together, okay, so how do the high, the medium, and the low sites fall out in eDNA? This is where eDNA becomes very powerful. So here, regardless, this is total community, so regardless of which groups we look at, if we look at the total eDNA structure of each site, this is a Venn diagram showing the overlap of all of the different groups. Highest numbers of species are either unique to each group with a core common group in here. So in other words, using eDNA, you can really clearly see, at least in coral reefs around Okinawa, really clear signals of anthropogenic impact. This looks, again, a little bit messy. This is, again, another one of these multidimensional analyses over here, but you have really clear separation of your low and your high impact sites. And again, just like the transects, the low sites are really tight. They have a really tight pattern. The high sites seem to be clustering into different groups. Perhaps this is because of different impacts. I'll talk more about this after. If you look at which groups are more or less common, as you go from left to right, we could look at the right over here. This is in very high impacted sites. And basically the green ones are groups of animals that are more common than you would expect, and the red are less common. So you have here more common, you have basically, what is it? Oh, a lot of different algae, and then as well amoebas, and then down here sponges and mycozoa, etc. Less common than expected mollusks, chordates, vertebrates, and certain types of bacillophyta, so another type of algae. So in other words, again, except for maybe vertebrates and porifera to some degree, and mollusca, a lot of these are understudied groups that we barely have a handle on for Okinawa. So if we really want to start looking at assess well impacted versus non-impacted sites, visual surveys work well, but they give you a very different answer than say what the eDNA gives. So perhaps using these both together would be good. In summary, some really simple conclusions. Obviously, your visual and your eDNA results differ. Which is correct? Well, that's hard to say. I think the answer is probably somewhere in the middle or combining these together. At the same time, sites have unique eDNA signatures, and this is something that's important. They change a little bit across seasons from other data that we have, but it really looks like each site has a unique DNA signature. So in other words, if we start doing biomonitoring or collecting eDNA across time, we can really see how sites will shift over time. And if we have some sort of unknown water sample, we can probably place it pretty well within a geographic framework of which site it is, which is cool. And at the same time, the visual and the eDNA results, they show anthropogenic pressures in different ways. So because you're dealing with different taxa, but I would like to argue that actually the patterns are very similar. So regardless of whether it's a visual survey or whether it's eDNA, you can discern statistically with enough samples whether it's an impacted or non-impacted site. And so this is something that I've been working with a few colleagues. We're really, I think, on the edge of working towards a general theory on anthropogenic pressures effects on biodiversity and natural ecosystems. You can see that this affected area is always a bit wider and a bit more spread. But I think if we can tease out the different factors better, we can say, okay, if you have landfill or runoff, you're going in this direction, you're going to get more amoebas, more sponges. If you have this, you're going to have more zoantharians. You have this, you're going to have less coral, more soft coral. And so I really think we can sort of start working at least on coral reefs towards a general theory on pressure and then go in and test this out. However, finally, the last thing I'd like to say, there are a lot of challenges remaining, and this is maybe where the hermit crab people come in and more serious taxonomy, which is my original bread and butter. One thing is we can get very fine detailed eDNA data now. We can go to a site, we can get water, we can tell you that this is very likely this site. We can have almost fingerprints of sites with some reason. We don't have that for environmental data, temperature, salinity. We can get some of it from satellites, but it's very, very fuzzy and wide mesh. So to get pinpoint information on microenvironmental stuff and not spend millions of yen is something that it's a wish list, but it's something at some point would be really cool to get. As well, our ability to use eDNA is based on taxonomy. So I can tell you at the phylum level, there's a lot of amoebas, or there's a lot of mollusks, or there's a lot of corals. But if you want to go to species level, fish, crustaceans are fantastic. Mollusks, fantastic. But a lot of these other groups, we don't have information. In other words, most marine species for most marine groups remain undescribed or unknown or not well known, and existing databases are incomplete. So for us to really use eDNA better, we need to have much better collection information and more workers on more groups in the Ryukyu archipelago. In other words, and this is an excuse for all of us to go diving, but I really think given the fact that we're facing an extinction crisis, even with these fancy technologies, we can do a lot of cool things, but to go down to species level assessments or to get into how do we protect these groups or where are they present or absent, we need a lot more basic biodiversity research. And with that, I'd like to say Nifiri Debiru to everyone who's helped out. And yeah, that's my presentation.
Thank you. So, sorry. So I made Naruse Sensei the co-host as well. So you may share, or you can just move the cable, whichever is easier for you. Maybe the cable, because I think we had a problem before.
Here, I got the
Oh,
cable.
no, maybe not. Oh, yes,
Yeah,
because then
yeah.
we can't see it here. Yes. Right. And then we can go back to this. Yes, I can see.
Yeah, I have HDMI.
That's right. Perfect. Yes, and I can already see it. And so I'll take off my sound.
Your sound sort of on. Yeah. You have to put yours on so they can pick up your voice on the mic. Cool.
Okay. Okay, thank you for giving this opportunity on the hermit crabs. Actually, I'm not a hermit crab guy, but happy to review the hermit crabs in Japan, and also the talk about their current status very roughly. Okay. Let's go. Okay, we talk about the species detail, each species detail, and conservation acts, and the threats and agenda for red listing. Okay, hermit crabs belong to Cynobitidae of the animal. Currently, there are 2 genera and 20 species in the world. Among them, the 2 genera and 8 species are have been recorded from Japan. 7 species of Cynobita and 1 species of Bergus. Okay. And plus, this researchers here have discovered a few more species, the unrecorded one, but those are unpublished, so we don't talk about it, but we talk about 8 species. Okay, and the main distribution area of round hermit crabs in Japan is Ryukyu Island, of course, and Ogasawara, and volcanic islands. And for the the Pacific coast of mainland, but there's the population size there is very small, so we mainly talk about Ryukyu Island and Ogasawara Islands. Okay, life cycle of round hermit crabs is like this. The mother release the larvae to the sea, and this larvae has the planktonic and parasitic, so they repeat repeat molting for about 4 or 5 times. Then come back to the course and settle and come back to the course. Then, for example, on the Cynobita berasens, they molt 4 times, and it takes about 15 to 19 days. So they spend 2 or 3 weeks on the sea, and during the time they may be possible to expand the distribution to the other islands. Okay. So the next is details about each species. Okay, and in Japan, we have 2 dominant species, the Cynobita rugosus and purpurus. Rugosus is widely distributed in West Pacific, and in Japan, the distribution area is the Ryukyu Islands and Ogasawara, and they are very common in sandy beach, especially around the front line of the coastal forest, and even the sandy beach as well. And Cynobita purpurus is it? I guess endemic to Japan. Is it? You will mention later. Okay. This is very rare species. Are rare for Cynobita to be endemic to very small area. And they are distributed in the entire Ryukyu Islands, Osumi Peninsula of the Kagoshima, and also Ogasawara. They are common in coastal forest behind sandy beach, and habitat tend to be a little bit more landward compared to the rugosus, but they overlap a lot. Okay. And the next one is the common species. They are not as common as the previous 2 species, but still very common here. And Cynobita cabipes is widely also distributed in the West Pacific. And in Japan, Ryukyu and Ogasawara are the main distribution area. And they're mainly in the coastal forest with a little bit more moist soil compared to the very open sandy beach. And habitat tend to be more landward compared to the purpurus or rugosus. And in the Cynobita braemebalans also the preferred similar habitat with cabipes, but they are more common in southern Ryukyus like Yaeyama or Miyako, and also the Ogasawara. And the next one is not so common species like Cynobita berasens. They are sporadically recorded from Zanzibar, East Africa to Cebu, Philippines. And in Japan, they have been recorded from southern Ryukyus like Miyako and Yaeyama. And this species has very different habitat. That inhabit the river mouth or brackish zone of the inner bay, and young can be found around the mangrove forest to the lower part of the freshwater river. And to rare species, Cynobita perlatus. This species is also widely distributed in Indo-Pacific and in Japan, southern Ryukyus. The very limited record from Kuroshima and Minna Island, like Minna Island, but very dominant in some offshore islands. Minnajima was, we went to the Minnajima for the biggest lateral survey with the Fujisan, and there are a lot there. And also this is an example of a North Guinea Island, Eastern Indian Ocean. It's everywhere like this. So common in some very limited islands, but very rare usually. And the biggest lateral, the coconut crab, they're also widely distributed in the West Pacific and in Japan, mainly Ryukyu and Osawa Island. Okay, and this is basically a giant, the hermit crab. They still use the shell when they are small, but once it gets larger, it don't depend on the shells. It's we just are very happy catching very big coconut crab in Christmas Island. The Christmas Island has very good conservation, and very large coconut crab everywhere in the forest. Okay, the summary of Cynobita species in Japan. Sorry to that, but okay, for the distribution of these species, mostly very widely distributed. Only the Papyrus has a very limited distribution, and habitat of them are also different species by species, little by little. The Lugosas is one most depending on the beach, and some others prefer a little bit landward like that. And this one, Beroses, has a completely different habitat. I'm there to rare to know. So okay. Okay, so for the conservation of Cynobita species in Japan, all Cynobita in Japan are designated as a national natural monument in 1970. And this natural monument thing is based on the law for the protection of cultural property under the jurisdiction of the Agency for Cultural Affairs. So this natural monument species tend to be selected by more cultural reason for how they're iconic for people, or how they're exotic, I think. So. And also the other thing is this Cynobita was designated as a natural monument in 1970. It was just 2 years after the Ogasawara was returned to Japan. I think people, maybe scientists encourage, or government may be encouraged to study, survey Ogasawara more, and maybe that's why that might help designating this species to the natural monument. Then 2 years later, the Okinawa returned to Japan, where the Cynobita is abandoned everywhere. But nobody changed this natural monument thing. So Okinawa, the population automatically became the natural monument as well. So they are still very common, but still the protected by the monument law. Okay. Is not small. If you violate, you imprisonment for up to 5 years, or fine up to 300,000 yen. And for influence of Cynobita natural monument for coastal development is limited. The because of this natural monument things, the president is supposed to conduct environmental assessment when you do the coastal development. After the assessment, if the result say the site is good habitat for cynobita, they will be relocated as a similar places. But it's not so good habitat or so habitat, not removed. They just go. They just do the development. So anyway, the development will be eventually conducted, but some very limited effect for this one. Okay. And conservation Burgess lateral is more the practical. And okay, yeah. They are protected by municipalities ordinance, by the city or town or village ordinances. The first ordinances made was for Tarama and Miyako. The Fujita put a lot of effort to start this ordinance, and followed by Ishigaki Island. Sorry, can't do the point. Okay, never mind. And Kagoshima Prefecture as well, the left side. But for the city, for example, the Okinawa Island, no ordinance yet. This is Yanaguni as well. No, so technically it's allowed to collect still. I mean, for any season, any size. Okay, but even Miyako and Ishigaki, other places, they have some limitation, but you can collect for certain size for certain period. So they have the very well organized one, but still a lot of gaps in the Japan. Okay, the adult or land crab, hermit crabs inhabit the various environment, but they have to come to the coast to release rabies and come back. So the loss of coastal environment will affect at least a part of their life cycle of almost all land hermit crabs. Okay, this is a paper from Prof. Reimer's laboratory. Okay, the Okinawa Island lost significant portion of the natural coastline over 100 years. Sorry, it's a bit too dark to show, but a lot of places have been replaced by the man-made enlargement coastline. And the graph shows the significant amount of the river mouths, rocky shore, and sandy beach have been lost and replaced by man-made coastline. So, which means Cynobita appear to be still common, but must have experienced a significant decline in their population size. And I think compared to the coastline, the development, the recent news shows the pet trade might affect the population, which I think Dr. Hsu will present later. Okay. Yeah, then I have experience for red listing, so when I think about doing for Cynobita, what I worry is, 7 out of 8 land hermit crabs are very widely distributed. So we roughly know about the status in Japan, but not sure about the population. They must be common in Taiwan also, right? And Philippines as well, I guess Indonesia as well. So the first thing I wonder is whether their status unknown. And next thing is the connectivity between the Japanese and others. If they are here, also the something we taxonomists bodies, they should have a lot of political species. So and this group is not very well studied in modern ways. So there must be a lot of the problem to address this thing. Okay. Yes. Yes, that's it. Really? Okay, so
Still, I can. Yeah, it's okay.
Yes. If you share, yes.
But it's no.
Oh.
Why?
It is working well here, just not on.
Working well there,
Let me try.
but it's not on our screen.
Try, is there a remote control? It's like the source.
I could try and project from mine.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe if that's maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Professor. No, I'll try for mine.
Okay,
Let's see,
okay,
because
okay.
it's working. Sorry. Let's see. And then you could just use my laptop.
Okay. Could you hear my voice? Sorry. Hello? Oh yeah, it works. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
And then
So
see if I can.
okay, let me just start. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to join this workshop. And actually, my research is really focused on the hermit crabs. So I think I am very pleased to share with my research. And today, my topic is related to poaching in the hermit crab. I think it's a big issue recently. So it might be a lot of story to share. So, but now,
Sorry to.
oh, it's okay.
It's acceptable.
Acceptable. Oh, it's.
I think. What do you think? Oh,
Well, or you can.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah. Good. Thanks. Yeah, it works. Okay, so I am Jiaxian Xu, and I am from Taiwan, but now I am working in Japan from National Institute for Environmental Studies, Gokurizu Kankyo Kenkyujo. Okay, so today I will not talking about the ecology side, but I will talking about conservation dimension side. And first, I would like to talk about why we need to care about land hermit crabs. Because somebody just say, oh, it's an invertebrate, it's a lot. We can see everywhere, but why we need to concern their status? And first, they are contributing to the seed dispersal of the coastal forest. So the coastal forest protects the human being. But if we don't have this kind of dispersal rule, I mean, these kinds of crabs, maybe the coastal forest will be unhealthy or its extent might be limited. And second is important because they are scavengers in the coastal forest around the coastal side. So if these kinds of animals decrease, it might be very severe problems for the coastal ecosystem. But we don't know because nobody conduct these kinds of research. But if we lose a lot of these kinds of species, it might be cause the big problem. And the third is they are food source for other animals. Actually, they come to the land, they become more stronger because they have the shore. But in my research, I found some species also consumes them, such like crab-eating mongoose is kind of conservation species in Taiwan. So they are also provide the food source. And the fourth is for the local people, they have the cultural service. For example, in Taiwan, several local fishers community, the residents think the hermit crab is the important, memory for them, significant memories for them. So I think it's part of their life, the local people's life, so they are important. And here is Okinawa, so for Okinawa's people also, because in the past, Okinawa's people, especially for Aboriginal people, when they died, their dead body were put into the cave in the coastal line. Yeah, so they think the hermit crab is the God's assistant because the hermit crab will consume the dead body. So it's kind of connecting with the human being and the heaven. So they provide certain of the cultural value for local people. And just like the previous sensei says, yeah, they are Tendenki woods. So yeah, it's the protected animals over the Japan. Okay, so I will not repeat this. So to my main story, I will share three of the case in my presentation. The first one is it happened in 2023. There was a couple of Chinese. They tried to poaching the hermit crab from Okinawa to China, and they were arrested. And finally, the punishment is not so serious. I mean, not so severe. Just 9万元 for the punishment, for the fine. So yeah, it's not any work. Yeah, it's very cheap. Yeah. It's the main point. It's cheaper than profit. And we also calculate if they success to smuggle, how much money they will earn. Actually, it's 10,000 US dollar, over 10,000 US dollar. Actually, sorry, 100 US dollar. Sorry.
So it's like a tax.
Yeah. So it works. Actually, for the poacher, it works. So it's a big problem. Although it's Tendenki woods, although they are protected animal, but the poacher from the other country, they still try to smuggle because the punishment is very low. Yeah, so not just the Chinese people, also in the same year, the Indonesian, Taiwanese also try to poacher and arrested. So actually, I start to concern these kinds of events because in Taiwan, there are a lot of people sell the species of the purpurus, just like Sensei said. The purpurus is domestic in Okinawa, but in Taiwan's population is unknown. So I just wondering, where are these individuals from? Because in Taiwan, the population is low. But yeah, so we start a lot of survey to understand where the crabs from and how much for these crabs. Just one individual is 25,000 yen Japanese dollar in Taiwan. So it's very high price. So there is a term called anthropogenic effect. Means high price individual. If people getting catch the high price individual and will cause the rarity of the species, it might become a bad cycle, and at least the species might be extinct. So it might be cause the problem. So cause the called the anthropogenic alien effect. So actually in Taiwan, we record purpose in Dongji Island in Penghu, and also Dongsha Island. We also found some of them, but the population is very low. So so in this research, we just use the 3 dimensions to understand where the crabs from and why they were from. So today I will not talk about the regulation part because it's too detailed, because it's just in Taiwan's regulation. I will talk about the price and the distribution and population. So first, we understand the price, which kinds of variables will cause the higher price. First is body size, of course. The larger crabs has the higher price. And selling platform, actually we don't know why. And color, and the darker color have the higher price. And the publication time means because my new record paper is published in 2017. So before 2017, the price is not so high. But after 2017, the price is higher. So maybe I have the mistake because I published this paper called the other AD effect. Because like many spiders also have this kinds of problem. So we also conduct a survey in Taiwan to understand the population, and we found that although the distribution is wide, but population is very low. Like we found 6 hours just can find 1 individual, or 65 hours we just find 20 individual. It's very far from Okinawa. Okinawa we can see a lot in any beach. So we think these kinds of crabs sold online in Taiwan is not from Taiwan. It must from Okinawa. So we start to collect some evidence, and also we found that we use the account to ask the seller, where is the crab from? And some of them said, it's from China. But in China, no, this species distribution. So it must from smuggling. So we have many evidence indicates they are from China, not directly from Okinawa. But in this year, 2 Taiwanese was arrested in Okinawa. So it changed my thought. Maybe they also directly from Okinawa. So in this case, we thought it's an international problem. We need to collaborate internationally. No matter in Japan, China, or Taiwan, or other countries, because the purpose also famous in Vietnam, Indonesia, other South area country, but they don't have purpose. So all are from Okinawa. But in Okinawa, it's very tricky. It's protected species. So how can we do? I think that is the main point we need to discuss in person here. Like this. It's in China's online market. They just sell a lot of this. And you can see the right-hand side. There is a crabs, and there's a number. I mean, the word and the number called the NTS4N. It's from Shawn. So it's a clue to prove that the crabs is from Okinawa because of Shawn. They give the number on the shore, and we saw the crabs on China's website. So in terms of the AD effect, not just the purpose and other species, like this is not published. It's called tiger. because one crab's larva and Professor Shishida in Taiwan, they collaborate to prove this is one of the new species. But the publication is not published. The larva just say, oh, there's a new species called tiger. After that, a lot of sellers start to sell this species on the internet. So I think, yeah, land hermit crab is a very sensitive species because they have a lot of profits on it. So if we don't pay attention now, if their population getting low, and at that time we want to conserve, it's too late. So yeah, I think now is the good timing to think about how can we management or conservation of these kinds of species. And the second story is about Japan. Yeah, actually we use the Japanese database to understand in the past 10 years what's the condition of the land hermit crab trap in the online shop. So after our analysis, we thought we found that the individual of the salt increased over 10 years. And the total price also increased. And they are getting more popular. Also, their attention rate also increased. So I think it's a signal to let us know how we need to take attention. And another right-hand side is the figure we can show. Yeah, in past 10 years, the small size in online shop increased, and XL size decreased. So it's the overfishing signal. So now we need to pay attention about that. Okay, maybe we can. All of the sellers are from Okinawa. It's 85% of them. Yeah. So yeah, we are in Okinawa. We should care about that. And the third story is about pet shop, physical pet shop, because the previous two cases is online shop. But I just curious, how about the physical pet shop? So in Japan, the exotic pet shop about 40%, let's say, all the land hermit crab. But it's very tricky, right? Because in Japan, it's a protected animal. So we don't know who has the license. It's a big problem because all of the shop, no matter in online or physical shop, they claim they have the license, but nobody see the license. What the license look like? Because the Japanese government, they no longer issue a new license after 1970. So maybe it's the gray area between legal and illegal. Yeah. And Taiwan just 12%, and also China. So Japan has the highest percentage of selling the land hermit crab. So in summary, yeah, there are many hints we can know. First, the market maybe still under its estimate. Yeah, because we just checked 2 platforms, but there are a lot of platforms we didn't check. And it might cause some problem because we smuggle this species, it's kind of easy. But if we smuggle other species like spider, centipede, it might cause the invasive risk. So if we didn't care about that, not just land hermit crab, other species, it might cause our ecosystem disaster. Yeah. And yeah, smuggle issue, we should collaborate with others. And yeah, maybe like that. So yeah, it's my presentation. Yeah, if you have any further question, I am very happy to share with that because most of my research are focused on land hermit crab in ecology and conservation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So before we go to the last presentation, and I'll be happy to have questions from the room, I just wanted to read some questions we had online. So maybe for Naruse Sensei. So there is a participant online, which is Felix from Indonesia, and he would like to ask about Quenobita purpureus, if it's still allowed to be sold inside Japan as pets, which is the question you were raising as well. Is it legally sold here? And it says that it cannot be exported, but it has appeared in Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia as pets. That's what, does it mean, or sorry, does it mean that C. purpureus can still be exported in limited amounts, or is it illegal at all to export them?
I'm not sure. There are still some people have license, actually, what I heard. So
To export.
export, I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe I can simply, yeah, they can sell in the Japan, but export is prohibited.
Yes, maybe something to ask the Ministry of the Environment. We can ask, we could have invited them as well. So Felix says that the Indonesian hobby group contributes to catching of these new species, and social media as Facebook's, and that's what you point out, including Hermit crabs. And he mentions education.
Yeah, thanks.
Exporters. So I have several notes from the IUCN on that we can, of course, discuss. One of the notes that Professor Naruse mentioned is how common they are. There is a thing you sometimes say is called the tragedy of the common. An animal can be perceived as common and then lose 50% of its population, and we don't even notice because it's still common. And some animals, like the hermit crab, are quite special in that their habitat is very narrow. You will see them not in the ocean, or very, very rarely in the ocean, and not really too much inland, except for some species, and they're always close to the forest. So they don't exist throughout that map. It's a wide map, but such a small, limited sleeve. And then, as you know, some of those have been lost. So there's loss of habitat, even though they're very thin beaches, which are being lost. So even though it's widespread, the habitat, the map sometimes tricks, as we call the extent of occurrence, is very wide, but the actual area of occupancy, the actual sites they occupy, is very tiny, very narrow, very tiny, and sadly disappearing, especially with climate change, as Dr. Reimer mentioned. Something else that I wanted to ask Dr. Hsu is that at some point I was thinking that we could ask Dr. Reimer to talk about how DNA could help us source these animals, because we have the specimens being seized. We could use DNA, like he mentioned, as a DNA footprint to know where they came. But actually, from your presentation, it seems ever clearer that those tools are not even needed, because it seems so obvious where they come from. That maybe that would be redundant in that sense. So anyone else has? Sorry, I didn't want to overtake it. I think I answered the questions online. Are there any questions in the room? Yes.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation. One thing that I was sort of thinking about, and maybe it didn't, or maybe it wasn't initially clear to me, was that, I think with conservation, I think the main goal of conservation is bringing about awareness for certain species. But then on the flip side, then might also increase demand for the species for people that are poaching, which is something that I never really thought about before. But what are some ways that maybe, I guess, with previous species that people have sort of mitigated that risk of poaching or like prevented it? Like, what are some ways that?
Yes, so I changed the microphone to be in my computer, but I'll just those online. I'll just rephrase Alexis' question, which is how can scientists mitigate the impacts of their discovery or the information they share to maybe minimize the impact in the poaching? Once we describe a species, it attracts poachers' attention. How can we mitigate that?
Okay, so actually it's a very good question. Actually I am an ecologist, but I saw a lot of lake hermit crab be poached, and the habitat disaster. So I become a conservation research. So that's a good question, because so far we just can prove smuggling exists, and if we prove smuggling exists, we can tell the government how kinds of policy can be changed. So I think it's because we are scientists, we cannot ban the trade. We cannot stop people captive the lake hermit crab. We don't have the right.
No, we can work with government and inform government. And we can learn about the legislation and inform it, but not. So something we would say, and Naruse Sensei mentioned that Fujita Sensei is looking to describe new species. And you mentioned as well the tiger hermit crab that is not yet described yet, already on sale. What sometimes researchers do is to actively or decisively hide the location. in the paper. So the label will have the information in a museum that is secured by a curator, but the paper itself will be purposely vague. We have done that for spiders because, as you know, it's a risk, where we just either only name the island and sometimes not even that. Because saying what the island is will attract people for tourism in that island to then, of course, collect. And the same thing, we've seen people mention a species that might be upcoming as new, like a picture, and that's enough for poachers to act on it or support local smugglers to do it for them. So sometimes hiding that information in ways that are meaningful might be that. Dr. Reimer, do you want to take your mute? Sorry, I'll mute mine. So.
Mute. All right. And then hang on. Oh, come on. All right. You can hear me. Yeah. Okay. Just related to that. Yeah, we do the same. Even when we're not describing species, sometimes if we're reporting on something really unique or special, we will not put the site name in there. We will not put any GPS in there. Like, for example, last year we had a paper on a 7,000-year-old Antipatherien, was down 525 meters deep. On a seamount. It'd be really hard to find, but even then, it's 3 meters by 4 meters. Someone could take a dredge net and just destroy the whole area looking for it. So we didn't put anything out there. And then related to that, like once we described the species of a zoantherian, which is not a hermit crab, no one cares. Did a press release. Next morning, I had a phone call from someone in Kagoshima asking me where it was, and they wouldn't identify themselves. Turns out they were a pet shop. But I didn't give them information, right? And also, they were just idiot. No offense, but they were idiots. And they didn't understand the animal. But I was like, oh, it's too deep for you. I lied. I said it was 100 meters deep, so they won't go diving. And then the final thing is, hang on, was related to that. I had another comment on that, but it's gone. So I'll find it after. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think Japanese government. Sorry.
I'm trying to mute it.
Japanese government has some of the good policies, such like if some new species they have the potential risk, they will directly ban the trade online or physically. Like the Ryukyus omugade, the centipede just found in Okinawa, and it's very big and beautiful, and just published the new species. Scientifically describe the new species, and Japanese government just immediately ban the trade. So I think it's one of the solution. Before we understand the information, we can just ban. And after we know the population or some information, we can manage the trade or some kinds of.
One of the sides of IUCN that I mentioned very briefly, but that relates to this, given that Taiwan and Japan are not the same country, is CITES. So CITES listing is one way for countries to agree to at least monitor, if not, like you say, ban trade, or at least regulate it in some way. But both IUCN and CITES will always defer to the government of Japan for their own legislation. But there are ways that if the government of Japan, if Taiwan and other countries would be so willing, there is ways for us, IUCN, to support you filling that information and provide the scientific information for countries that they can then decide or not to support. But that's one step we sometimes do, help scientists communicate in that legal terminology and format with CITES representative of their own countries, because ultimately it's up to countries to decide what they want or not to trade. But it's definitely something to consider, maybe for a conversation at a later point. Any more questions or points, or did you? Yes, I will mute.
Unmute. Okay, you can hear me. I know we're talking about her, but one other animal that recently we've seen in Okinawa decrease that's just worth mentioning is giant sea anemones. The anemone fish live a very short amount of time, well, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years, but they have to have an anemone. And usually after each Golden Week, which is the big holiday in Japan coming up, anemones are gone from popular dive sites. And so we think it's tourists coming, collecting the anemones and the anemone fish. And anemones can live tens to hundreds of years, no one knows, but you you remove those anemones, which are in low density, big, easy to see in low numbers, and the whole it's gone, right? So, this is something that's not regulated by anything, and probably in sites where no one goes diving, it's not a big deal, but at popular dive sites, they disappear statistically significantly right around holidays. And, it's something no one would ever think about, but you don't want to turn into Okinawa Prefecture, say, with sea cucumbers.
Yeah.
So there were sea cucumbers being overharvested. The prefecture realized, we should do something, but the time they did something, it was already too late. So, maybe if there was a system in place when we're describing species or putting a publication out, like a conduit to the Ministry of Environment to say, this is an issue, or this is a species that could be targeted, and then you have them come out at the same time. Or with sea cucumbers, you do something on PopGen, and at the same time, you contact the government and say, guys, you need to do something about this. If there was some sort of official I don't know the English, intake, or like an official conduit or a way to get this information quickly and not with endless meetings and bureaucracy, that'd be cool. Just a wish.
No, sorry, I forgot to ask. So I will, yes, I think that's a conversation that I hope we will have after the workshop. We don't want to delay everyone here too much. And I have the presentation for Shawn Miller, who is kindly here as well. And I will see if I can share it myself. Hopefully that will go well. And then we can go for more questions, and we'll see how we sit on time. Okay, so I'll share. Share screen. No, I'll share screen one. Hi. There you go. And I will invite Shawn to take my seat. I think that's better. Right? Oh, do you want me to forward slides?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Shawn Miller. I'm a wildlife photographer, and I've been photographing the hermit crabs of Okinawa for over 15 years. And today I'm going to talk about what I've learned in this journey, as well as their major threats, and also the conservation projects that I'm currently working on, and the evolution of those projects, and the highlights of those projects. And some of the stuff is going to be pretty basic, and then I'll get into the more detailed stuff. But why do hermit crabs need shells? And it's real simple. They are not born with shells. They don't make their own shells. So they have to locate and find discarded seashells from either marine snails or land snails. An ideal home for a shell here in Okinawa. So a lot of the juveniles, they'll use these nerite shells, and the larger hermit crabs will use turban shells. And they prefer shells that, based on their color, based on their size, and based on their texture as well. But most importantly, they really like the shells that have been modified, that have been used by other shells, because they're really roomy inside. And it's just like the same thing. We have a favorite pair of pants, right? It's not too tight, it's not too loose, it fits just right. It's the same concept. But my definition of an ideal home is where the hermit crab can pull in completely and retract its legs and use its claw to form an operculum-like trap door, just like a gastropod would. And that way it will prevent predators from entering. Now, if they don't have a shell, eventually it's called desiccation, where they will dry up and die. And this is an example of a hermit crab we found out at night. And you can see how dry it was. So we offered it a shell, and immediately it swapped in and went into the shell. So they don't prefer walking around like this. They're looking for shells at the time. Now, they have their decapods, so they have 10 legs. The first pair is used for predation or protection, grabbing things, holding on to things. The second and third pair are used for walking, climbing, and fourth and fifth pair are used for latching onto that shell so they can hold on to it nice and tight. Next, we have modified mobile homes, and these are some of the shells that I have found the hermit crabs adapting with, and they will use them until they're completely gone. And sometimes they're forced to do this to adapt with shells like this, but you can see how they've been modified internally, so they have a lot of room inside. But eventually these shells will break as they fall, and then they have to find something new. Now, how many of you in this room have ever collected a shell? Raise your hand off the beach. Okay, so that's over 50% of us, right? And I'm guilty as well. I was fascinated with shells at a young age, their design, intricate patterns, and I just loved collecting them. But now, instead of collecting them, I'm giving them back to nature, and I'm inspiring other people to give back to nature. So a lot of times, people that lived in Okinawa, they collected a bunch of shells, and they feel guilty about this once they learn about the behavior of hermit crabs depending on these. They'll send them back to me, and we'll get with programs with children, and we'll bring them out on the beach, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and we'll give them back to nature, clean the beach up, and make the place a better place. Low battery? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay. But so it's important to give these back to nature. Okay, and the hermit crabs need a variety of shells because as they grow, right, as they get larger, they need a larger shell. So it's important to have a variety of these shells available for them. Okay. Next, we have fishing. Now, fishing is extremely popular here in Okinawa, and the fishermen use these for bait. Now, the problem here is, in order to get to the hermit crab, they just take the easy route. They use a hammer or a rock, and they just smash it. And they're killing a protected species, and they're generally going for the larger ones. And then they're also smashing the shells that would be passed down to the next generation of hermit crabs. So that's another problem. Now, last year was extremely bad for poaching, and I saw hundreds of these traps. And when you see this, I call it a concealed baited trap. When you see this, you wouldn't even know, the average person would not even know that this is a trap. And what the poachers do is they show up early in the morning and they cut the coastal plants. They place the bait in the sand, they put the plants on top, so the hermit crabs will go underneath the sand and they will sit there. They're not obvious, nobody will see them. The poacher comes back early in the morning, late in the evening with a bucket, gets the big ones, puts it back down, leaves the small ones, and repeats. So it's a brilliant way, but it's not so obvious, right? It's not an obvious trap. So a lot of these in Yomitan Village last year. And here's a quick video of it, and all the big ones were gone by this point. You can see how they cut it, and small ones underneath. They already got the big ones by that point. Next, we have natural predators. Like every hermit crab you see in a pet shop was taken from the wild, right? Natural predators, we have ants, invasive ants as well, big problem. We have birds, and we have the ghost crab, of course, which can crack the shell and actually eat them. And I see a lot of them feeding on the hermit crabs at night as well. What do hermit crabs eat? So they will eat pretty much anything that washes ashore. So they're like the garbage cleaners, the beach cleaners. They clean the shoreline, nuts, seeds, fish, turtles, you name it, they will feed on it. But one of their favorite foods is the screw pine. And when this ripens, it drops to the ground. And from there, it attracts the hermit crabs. They smell it. They help out with seed dispersal and creating these beautiful coastal forests and aerating the sand as well. But if what they do to protect themselves, they either fight, flee, or freeze. So in this situation, predator comes over the top, birds flying by, or humans walking by, it'll freeze. And it'll blend in to its environment. And it's either masquerading or is it coincidence? So you can see how it looks. It resembles the favorite food that it actually eats, which is actually pretty amazing. Right? It blends in very well. I think it's extremely important to protect these natural areas because we need nature, right? Nature doesn't need us. We all feel much better when we go to the beach, go swimming, go scuba diving, walk in the forest. So it's important to protect these crucial areas for future generations. And if we destroy these areas, these coastal forest protection areas that these hermit crabs have helped build, right, then they're going to be gone along with other animals that are in there, the caterpillars, the butterflies, the snakes, lizards, and so on. All that stuff that's living in there, it's going to be gone as well. So it's extremely important to protect this for future generations. Something I've noticed lately is obviously habitat destruction, but we have a lot of these beach cleaners on our beaches because they want them to be nice and calm, clear of any debris, glass, rocks, and things like that. But this is heavy machinery, And as it's going over, it is killing wildlife. It's collecting rocks and hermit crabs, tumbling, cracking shells, and so on. And then they dump it into a big pile. In this situation, they dumped it, and it was actually pushing over into this beach cabbage plant and destroying the only habitat that was left for the hermit crabs. And luckily, I was able to talk to the program manager and tell him the situation, bring him out there, show him the hermit crabs. We even placed donated shells there. And next week, he made a change, moved the pile back. Now he's going to make it a little protected area for the animals. So just talking to people nice and kindly and explaining to them what's going on. A lot of times they're unaware of the situation. This is becoming more common. I've been in Okinawa for over 25 years, walking these beaches, and it's getting even worse lately. A lot of stuff from China, Korea, and Japan washing up. And this is an entanglement hazard for a lot of animals like sea turtles, whales, and so on. But it also causes problems with fish. They will eat plastic, seabirds, and so on. Now, with the hermit crabs, a big problem are the actual plastic containers. If those plastic containers are off, the caps are off, water goes inside, and if it's at an angle where a baby hermit crab can crawl inside of it, it'll go in, it'll die, and release the death scent. It's oleic, I think it's called oleic acid, and it releases this scent that triggers other hermit crabs to go in, and then they follow suit, and the same thing, just more of them die. So it's a trap, and this is why it's important to clean up the plastic pollution on our beaches and get involved in a beach cleanup if you haven't already. Another substance I find washing ashore is called paraffin. It's a beauty supply additive, and the hermit crabs, they love this. They latch on it. They do not want to get off of it. It tastes so good to them. And I also find a lot of plastic, like the colored plastic, the greens and the blues, where fish, there'll be teeth marks in it, where the fish love the taste of the chemical, the plastic added oleamide. Okay, so it gives them a smell of food. It smells like something that they would eat, so they come in and it attracts them to it. Okay. Next, we have roadkill, and this is the season right now that roadkill is extremely big right now because it's mating season, breeding season. So the hermit crabs that are not already on the coastal forest are making their way down for that. And once a hermit crab gets run over in the road, smashed in the road, basically what happens is you destroy the shell and a hermit crab is killed, but then it also releases that acid, that smell, and then it attracts more shells or more hermit crabs to come in and feed on it, and then the cars run over more, basically. So it's a big problem, right? And another thing I notice is beach barriers. So these new areas are being built. They put up higher curbs than normal. They don't put wildlife tunnels in. We have many seawalls, and these animals get trapped, and eventually they get run over. People don't pay attention to this stuff here. Now, in 2010 was when I found my first hermit crab adapting with waste. And I was absolutely amazed when I found this, because we were up in the jungles and basically looking for endangered species, and I found this. And so immediately after I photographed it, I got online, I contacted an editor, sent it to him, a National Geographic, and she told me to post it on the Your Shot page. And so I did, but I never heard anything back. I didn't have the good content. I didn't have a great image. I just thought it was amazing. And I was like, this is special to me. And so that was 2010. And so why do hermit crabs adapt to plastic? If there's an available shell, they will use that. So they're just making do temporarily until they find a better option, only because there's no shells available. So in 2014, I decided to start my own project to bring awareness to this issue, and basically to spread awareness to the plastic pollution crisis, the shell over collection crisis, and reconnect people with nature. That was the whole goal. And to have fun with it as well, and to improve my photography and get outdoors. And we would go outdoors at night and look for these animals. And the more I did it, the better I got at it. And so far, I've photographed over 200 of these hermit crabs living in plastic. I even had to pay my children to come out with me. If they could find one, I'd pay them 500 yen if they could find one. And one night we found 13 of them. So yeah, exactly. So we gave names, fun names that they related to. So this is a light bulb in. We named him Edison. Next, we have Mr. Positive adapting with a positive battery terminal cap. Lug nut. This is a lug nut cover. And these are all found adapting with them. Fire hydrant. We have elbow. And
now, yeah.
It's disconnected.
And that kind of, sometimes it comes and goes, but hang on. with my.
Okay, I'll just share screen again. Okay, I think.
All good?
I think we are. Can you see?
Yeah, so it's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's the. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, good to go. All right, so in 2020, I started the Make the Switch for Nature project, and I received some donated shells from a collector in Taiwan, and he was tired of me just posting images of hermit crabs in trash. So he's like, here's something, you can do something and put these out in the coastal forest, which I was already putting some shells out in the forest for them. But he sent me these really nice ones, and I didn't want to just put them in the forest and have somebody take them, right? So I figured, what can I do to prevent people or discourage people, hopefully, from taking these shells? So what I did was, with a Dremel tool, I would carve MTS4N, Make the Switch for Nature, and then a tracking number. And then every beach that I placed it on, I would document that as well, right? And this could be a way to catch poachers. We know exactly what beach they were placed on, right? And the whole project was to spread joy, inspire change, and save lives. And so far, in this time frame, almost 5 years, I've carved 945 shells, right? So it's been pretty intense. And I'll pass one around just so you guys can see what they actually look like. And but now I don't make them look nice. I make them big, obvious, and then that way they know. And when people see it, they inspire them. They look it up. It triggers curiosity, right? More than anything, we're like, what is this? Either way, poachers are still going to take anything, right? It doesn't matter regardless, and they'll just have them switch into another shell. But as we saw, one of my shells made it to a Chinese auction, so they are definitely taking them from Okinawa. That's the one good thing that we know. Now, I also get a variety of shell donations from around the world, and we do put them on beaches with these programs, with these community education and outreach programs, because I think it's important to get the kids involved. This is the generation that's going to be able to make the change, right? From the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, environmental clubs, science clubs. So we get them out there, we teach them about the hermit crabs, we teach them about protecting them, don't touch them, leave them alone, just take photos. We need to protect them because they are a national treasure of Japan. And then we put donated shells in the coastal forest where the people can't find them. And the hermit crabs are capable of smelling and finding these shells at night. And then after, we actually clean the beach. And then from there, everybody has a great day. So we do a beach cleanup and make the place actually better than what it was. And from the times, what I see, which is great, is this is becoming trendy, beach cleanups, which is great. There's more of it washing ashore, right? But it is becoming a cool thing to do. Next, this was a situation where I was on Torrey Beach, and I found a hermit crab. I was walking. Of course, it went into freeze mode, locks in, and then I get out of my backpack, I pull a variety of shells, and basically from doing it so much, I know generally about the size of the aperture based on the size of the hermit crab and its claws, what it's going to go for, right? Based on that size. So I put the shells around the hermit crab, and then I'm going to show a quick clip of what happens. And it chooses it on its own. I end up keeping the plastic. They keep the shell. I call it trading plastic for shells. And I've traded 169 so far. Oh, yeah. And this is all them doing it, all natural. But you can see they investigate it. What's so cool about it is they rotate it in a direction where sand would fall out of it, rocks would not go in, or coral. So they rotate it in that specific direction, which is really neat. And then they place their claws inside to measure it, to gauge it. And that's what he's doing right there. And then he makes the release, and he makes the move.
Yeah.
And you can see this one's really unique because watch what will happen. He'll push the plastic away with it, with his claw. There he goes, right there. You see that? Yep. So it's pretty amazing when that happens. And it took me a while to figure out how to do this, but a lot of the times I go out by myself. So there's not a big threat. If there's a lot of people, sometimes they're scared, hesitant, they won't do this, right? So these are some of the caps, and majority of them are plastic. I have probably about 6 that are glass and some that are metal as well. Okay. Now, some of the most common ones that you're going to see are these cassette gas tanks from the beach barbecues. This is probably the most common one that you're going to see, right? And then we have clear caps from beauty supplies. And then we also have the black cap on the bottom, which are from public school seats. On the bottom of the chairs are plugs in the Japanese schools, in the elementary schools. And these somehow make it their way down to the ocean. And I find a lot of them adapting with those caps as well. Now, some of the highlights of this adventure so far is learning to become better at photography at night. And now I'm using more, not so much technical gear, but more of videos, using just the iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just much easier, and reels, showing people reels. They really love seeing that. The trading, offering them shells and so on. So I'm getting better at actually doing video instead of photography. And if you want to learn more about my TED Talk, I did a TED Talk at OIST, Adapting to Our Changing Environment, about the hermit crabs in 2017. And then finally, 8 years after I submitted that photo to National Geographic, they came back to me and wanted my images in the most iconic edition of National Geographic, which was Plastic or Planet, to get, to get the outreach about our plastic pollution issue. So I was pretty proud of that. And then last year, I also was a speaker at CrabCon. So if you're a crab nerd, you like hermit crabs, this is the place to go. A lot of scientists, a lot of researchers, there's people, collectors, there's a lot of great information. I'll be giving a presentation as well, so check that out. And from last year, I was on the Kelly Clarkson Show, so I got to tell her about my Make the Switch for Nature project, which was a big deal, right? And if you have any questions, you need to contact me. Here's my information. And thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
No, that was great. I have some comments from the chat. I can see that. Yeah. Is there any comment here in the room?
Yes.
Yes. But let me do the sound thing. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
My speaker's on. Okay. Do you notice, particularly like you've been doing this now for 15 years, are you seeing less and less large shells, for example, or are you noticing, obviously there's been an increase in poaching, there's more plastic pollution, but I don't think there's many people out there that are looking at all the different sizes of crabs all the time. Is there any sort of trends that you've seen over the last 15 years? Yeah. Was similar to do you see anything?
Yeah, it's pretty common, the larger ones. And even like the Sazai, that they prefer, the big shell that they prefer, is not, you're not seeing that actually in restaurants anymore, or in food, supermarkets. They're not being sold. So the population is limited as well. So from over collecting, I believe, yeah. And those are the most valuable ones, are obviously the larger hermit crabs, yes.
Okay. What about
medium-sized ones? Have you seen anything less of them, or
not necessarily less of them, I would say, but most of the medium-sized ones are highly damaged as well, and they're dealing with those modified ones that have been broken. Yeah.
Okay. Because we had an undergrad student who was looking at the sizes of shells and whether they were damaged or undamaged at different beaches across Okinawa. And it was exactly like you said, there was tons of little shells. Yeah. And then there were a few big shells, like super smart survivor types, right?
Exactly.
But there's this huge gap in the medium sized, and the medium ones that existed had holes in them, etc. too. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like, I guess down the line you could look at almost like the sizes you're seeing and figure out, okay, we need more mediums, because you have these so-called super spawners or smart ones, right? You could almost start to think of ways to plan recovery programs or something.
Yeah. Cool.
Just a comment.
Thank you.
I know that you've been working on it for a while and having your work and actually having one of your photographs at home still. I think it's really amazing that you're continuing this type of conservation and this type of field work in a way. But I did have a question about the concealed bait trap. Is that something that is new? Has that always been around, but now you're seeing it more frequently?
It's always been around, but I did see it more frequently last year. It was everywhere. Yes.
And are there other types of like bait traps that people use, or
Yeah.
is that the main
Yeah,
one?
that's the main one that is not obvious to the human eye, the average person. But they will also use like a plastic container, and they will cut it and put them in the ground, and then the hermit crabs fall into it or a bucket. So they all will also use that as a trap. But yeah, those are the only two that I've actually seen used as a trap.
So if someone is maybe, I don't know for the term for this would be like an average beachgoer, if
Yeah.
we see a bait trap, should we like, if we see something should be like.
Yeah, you should
disperse it,
you should
remove it?
dismantle it and throw it into the coastal forest and and get rid of the bait, because their bait is also going to be underneath the sand as well, which might make it worse because they're going to be attracted and they're going to be obvious, where people will see the hermit crabs staying on top of that. And I'm not going to tell you what the bait is because it's so good and we can't let poachers know what the bait is. Yes.
Would you mind showing the bottle again, just so I have
Oh,
it?
yeah.
Sorry.
So if they cut the bottle in half and then they place it in the sand with bait,
I
and then the
see.
hermit crab crawls in, falls down.
Like a pitfall trap.
Yeah, pitfall trap.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do you know the gradient of the shape?
I'm sorry?
Bite shape. Do you know the gradient of the bite?
Gradient of the bite.
Yeah, the bite. What's the material? What kinds of bite? Is it food?
Oh, I think for fishing. You mean when they use it for bait? I think they're using it for bait
I
for
mean,
fish.
the bait trade. But the bait
trap,
trade
yeah.
for the hermit crab. What's
Yeah.
the gradient?
What do you mean, Nick? I'm sorry.
What kinds of food
Oh,
they use?
well.
Bait trade.
Maybe you can talk about
Oh,
it.
yeah, so what do they use, what kind of bait do they use for the trap?
Yeah.
I could tell you,
It's
It's a secret.
No, you don't want to tell people.
Because otherwise
Yeah,
it might,
because it's online and there's.
Yeah.
because it might encourage them to
Yes,
do it
yes,
further.
it's that good.
Yeah, I just curious because I know what kinds of gradient in
Yeah,
Taiwan.
we could talk. Okay.
Yeah. So any more questions in the room before I go to the couple of comments I had online? Behind me? All right. So we're still on the comment from Felix from Indonesia. He was saying about the social media as that they show too much on Facebook. And then Mary Akers, which we both know from CrabCon, and she said that one of the longer-term tragic results of poaching is that it isn't often mentioned. It is the loss of valuable shell resources, which Shawn mentioned quite a few times, but it's true. Especially those shells used in larger individuals over generations. One of the things people, when they use it for bait, is that they break the shells to get to the crab. So and of course the roadkill is a great example. I didn't mention it for the coconut crab, but it's one of the threats there as well. Actually, there used to die many, sadly, in Christmas Island and others, but now there's been more active from the side of the rangers to reduce that. Here in Okinawa, I've seen them also dead on the road. I've stopped by car to try and, of course, like most people, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely something that appears to me that could be easily fixed or addressed, especially because it costs money to put barriers. So if we just told them, don't spend money on that, that's harming a national treasure. I really like the idea of being a national treasure. It shows how much it's valued. I just would like to see if that could be used to engage with authorities in a recognition that it's already valued. Here, how we can put that value into action, into conservation action, of course. So, okay, and CrabCon, Shawn already mentioned, and Mary, of course, Mary Akers works with CrabCon, so I'm looking forward. I think several of us will be there this year in July. That was all I have for presentations. I'm sorry it took literally all the time we had.